The jungle at the edge of the desert was alive with strange voices. Crickets sang in feverish rhythm, owls called out from the shadows, and somewhere in the distance a coyote let loose a mournful cry that echoed between the trees. The air smelled of damp earth and crushed pine needles, heavy with the musk of animals that moved unseen. Moonlight filtered through the tangled canopy above, falling in fractured silver streaks across the ground, and in the middle of it all, Evelyn Harper fell to her knees. Her dress, once pale blue calico, was torn at the hem and streaked with dirt. One sleeve dangled loose, ripped nearly to the shoulder. Her chest heaved as if she had been running for hours, and her boots, once polished and proper, were scuffed raw from scrambling across rocks and roots. Evelyn pressed her palm flat against the ground, desperate to anchor herself to something solid, anything that wouldn't shift or betray her. But it was her voice that betrayed her instead. It cracked through the night in a raw confession she hadn't meant to speak aloud. "I am no more virgin." The words were torn from her throat, ragged with shame. They startled even her. For a moment, she felt as though the trees themselves recoiled, their leaves rustling not from wind but from judgment. The sound of her voice seemed too big for her body, too final. Evelyn clutched her chest and let her forehead fall against the bark of the nearest sycamore. Hot tears running down her cheeks. She had been raised to believe purity was the measure of her worth. That once it was taken, stolen, forced, whatever, the means it could never be reclaimed. And now, in the darkness of this wilderness, she felt hollow, stripped bare not just of dignity but of her very identity. The night pressed close around her. Every sound, the crack of a branch, the call of a night bird, even the hum of insects seemed sharper, like the world had turned predator. Evelyn's breath came fast, her ribs aching from the effort to keep quiet. Somewhere behind her, too, far back to see but close enough to haunt, lingered the memory of the man who had done this to her. His mocking smile, his grip like iron, his whisper that she would never escape. She had escaped. But escape did not feel like freedom. A twig snapped. Evelyn stiffened, the sound slicing through her grief. Her head jerked up, eyes darting into the tea. Black between the trees. For a moment, she thought she had imagined it. Then came another sound, the soft brush of leaves parting, deliberate, steady, not the aimless movement of an animal. Someone was there. Her first instinct was to run again. Her body was still primed for flight, heart slamming against her ribs, legs trembling with exhaustion but ready to move. She pushed herself upright, clutching at her torn dress, and spun toward the sound. From the shadows he emerged. He was taller than any man she had ever seen, his shoulders broad as though carved from stone, his chest bare and glistening faintly under the moonlight. Strands of long black hair framed his face and caught the silver glow, falling against feathers and beads woven into tribal jewelry across his collarbone. His eyes, dark, sharp, watchful, met hers without hesitation. An Apache warrior. Every warning she had ever heard in town about the Apache rushed back at once. Savages, raiders, merciless killers. Her breath hitched, her throat closing with fear. She stumbled back a step, her boot scraping against a rock. But the man did not rush her. He did not raise a weapon. He did not even reach for her. He simply stood there, the silence between them, broken only by the distant rush of water somewhere beyond the trees. His presence was undeniable, powerful yet strangely calm, like a wolf who had noticed but not decided whether to attack. Evelyn's fingers dug into the fabric of her dress at her chest. Her pulse roared in her ears. Shame, fear, and exhaustion tangled inside her, and yet she could not look away. For the first time since she fled, since the night broke her, someone looked at her and did not see ruin. He tilted his head slightly as though studying her. The moon caught in his eyes, making them glint. And though he said nothing, Though the jungle still held its breath around them, Evelyn felt something shift inside her, a question blooming where despair had rooted. What if she wasn't as lost as she believed? The warrior took a step forward, slow and deliberate, his gaze never leaving hers, and Evelyn, frozen in fear yet tethered by some unspoken thread, stayed where she was. Evelyn's breath trembled in her throat as the Apache warrior stepped from the shadows. His presence filled the clearing, steady and unhurried, like a boulder that could not be moved. For a long, tense moment, he only watched her, his dark eyes catching the glint of moonlight. She expected violence, mockery, or claim, the way the outlaw had treated her, but none came. Instead, there was something disarming in the stillness of him. A question unspoken but pressing. Her legs wobbled beneath her. She pushed herself away from the sycamore, clutching the torn edge of her dress to her chest as though cloth could shield her from judgment. "Stay back," she rasped, though her voice shook, brittle as dry twigs. The warrior tilted his head, his long hair falling over his shoulder. For a moment, she thought he might not understand her words. Then, without speaking, he made a small gesture, a hand motioning toward the trees beyond, not commanding, but inviting. Evelyn blinked at him, confused. Again he gestured, this time turning slightly and taking a few slow steps away, as though showing her a path. His movements were deliberate, not threatening. It was strange, but she felt less cornered when he walked ahead of her. She hesitated, biting her lip until she tasted blood. Her instinct screamed not to trust, yet the deeper instinct, the one rooted in survival, told her to follow, and so she did. They moved in silence through the thicket, the night alive with the chatter of insects and the occasional snap of a twig underfoot. The air grew cooler, fresher, and after some time, the distant roar of rushing water reached her ears. Evelyn slowed, unsure if she was hearing it right, but the sound swelled until it was unmistakable. Water. The path opened, and before her stretched a sight she had never seen, a waterfall spilling from a jagged cliff into a jade-green pool. Mist rose from the base, cool and sweet on her face. Moonlight caught in the spray, scattering pale halos across the rocks. The wild, dangerous jungle suddenly softened into something almost holy. Evelyn gasped, her hand flying to her chest. It wasn't just beautiful, it was relief. Her throat had been parched since she fled, every breath scraping her lungs like sandpaper. The sight of that clear pool brought tears to her eyes. The warrior walked straight to the edge, crouched low, and dipped his hands into the current. His muscles flexed as he lifted water in his cupped palms. He turned to her then, extending his hands. Her chest tightened. For a moment, she stood frozen, torn between distrust and desperate need. The world she had known had taught her that men gave nothing without expecting something in return. Her stomach knotted with shame at the thought, and yet her lips cracked. Painfully, her tongue heavy with thirst, she stepped forward, cautiously. His hands remained steady, patient, as though he would wait all night if needed. Finally, Evelyn leaned down and drank. The water was shockingly cold, biting against her teeth and tongue, but it rushed through her body like life itself. She drank again and again until the ache in her throat eased. When she lifted her head, droplets clung to her lips and chin. She realized the warrior was still watching her, but not with hunger or claim. His gaze held something steadier, respect. Embarrassed, she turned away, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. "Thank you," she whispered hoarsely, unsure. If he understood. To her surprise, he spoke. His voice was deep, accented but clear enough. "Water is for all. You take. You live." Evelyn swallowed, stunned at the simplicity of it. No judgment, no strings, just truth. They lingered by the pool, Evelyn kneeling at the edge to splash her face, the cold shock of it peeling away layers of fear. She caught her reflection in the water, dirt streaking her cheeks, eyes swollen from crying, hair tangled and wild. She hardly recognized herself. Behind her, the warrior remained standing, a silent sentinel. When she turned, their eyes met again. This time she saw no predator, no captor. Only a man carved by wilderness, carrying something unspoken in his stillness. Her lips trembled. The words rose before she could stop them. "Why are you helping me?" He paused, searching her face. His English faltered, but his meaning was clear. Because you cry, because you break. Broken bird still flies if someone guard her wings. The words hit her chest harder than any blow. For a moment, Evelyn had no air. Tears welled again, but these were different. Not only grief, but the faintest stirrings of something she thought lost forever. Hope died, and under the roar of the waterfall, Evelyn Harper wept freely for the first time, not with despair, but with the fragile beginnings of release. Evelyn followed Dakota through the wilderness, the waterfall's roar fading behind them. Her body still trembled from exhaustion, but her steps grew steadier with every pace. It was strange how silence could feel different depending on who walked beside her. With the outlaw, silence had been suffocating, a weapon. With Dakota, silence was space to breathe, to exist without demand. The jungle thinned until the ground rose gently into a grove that felt almost secret. Vines twisted over leaning wooden posts, relics of a fence long ago abandoned. Trees spread crooked branches heavy with fruit apples, though smaller than the ones sold in town. Some were bruised and insect-bitten, but many glowed pale gold and red in the afternoon light. Evelyn froze at the sight. Her stomach tightened painfully. She hadn't eaten since the morning before, when everything still seemed ordinary, when she still believed she was safe. The memory stabbed her, sharp and bitter. Dakota moved ahead, stepping over tangled roots with a grace that made him seem part of the land itself. Without hesitation, he placed his bare hands against a tree and began climbing. Evelyn's breath caught. His muscles flexed as he pulled himself upward, his long hair swaying against his back. The beads in his necklace clicked softly as he moved. He reached for the apples with careful precision, testing each before plucking them. One by one, he dropped them into the grass below. They landed with soft thuds at Evelyn's feet. She bent to pick one up, cradling it in her palm. The skin was cool, mottled with freckles of sunlight. Her throat ached. She wanted to devour it, but shame held her still. What right did she have to take anything, when she already felt emptied of worth? Dakota dropped lightly from the tree, landing with a quiet thump. He gathered a few apples into his large hands and held one out to her. "Eat," he said simply. Evelyn stared at him. Her lips parted, but no words came. "Eat," he repeated, firmer this time, though not unkind. His English was rough but steady, his meaning clear. You starve. Spirit die first. Body die after. Not good. She clutched the apple tighter. Slowly, she raised it to her lips and bit. The taste exploded across her tongue, tart, sharp, almost painful after such emptiness. Juice ran down her chin, and she caught it with the back of her hand, embarrassed. But Dakota didn't laugh. He didn't even stare. He simply sat on a fallen log, eating his own apple with calm, steady bites, as though it was the most natural thing in the world. Evelyn ate another bite, then another, until the ache in her stomach dulled into something softer. She lowered the apple, her shoulders loosening. She looked at him, finally daring to ask the question pressing against her heart. "Why are you helping me?" Dakota's dark eyes flickered toward her, then back to the orchard around them. He seemed to weigh his words before speaking. "Because you cry. Cry like bird with broken wing. Birds still fly if someone guard her." Wings. The phrase struck her like a stone. Evelyn's chest tightened, tears springing back to her eyes. She turned her head quickly, ashamed he would see her weep again. Yet there was no mockery in his voice, no judgment. Only quiet truth. She wrapped her arms around herself, staring at the crooked rows of trees. They must have been planted long ago, perhaps by settlers who dreamed of orchards and harvests but left or died before they could tend them. Time had claimed their fences, but the fruit endured. Something about that steadiness, the trees growing, giving, surviving, brought a lump to her throat. Dakota stood and walked a few paces, scanning the shadows. Always watchful, always alert, like a guardian carved from earth. Evelyn studied him in secret. His body was scarred in places, evidence of battle she could only imagine. His silence wasn't emptiness, it was weight, the kind carried by someone who had lived through more than words could hold. For the first time, she wondered what grief he bore. When his gaze returned to hers, she flinched slightly, caught staring. But he only nodded toward the apples still scattered in the grass. Take more, for walk. Evelyn obeyed, gathering several into her torn skirt. The fruit's weight was grounding in her arms, like carrying proof that she was not destined to. Starved Dot, as they left the orchard, she cast one last glance behind her. The trees swayed gently in the wind, branches heavy with life. For a moment, she imagined herself as one of them, not perfect, not untouched, but still standing, still bearing fruit. Dot, and for the first time since her tears had stained the jungle floor, she felt the faintest whisper of possibility. The morning came not with silence, but with the song of the forest itself. Evelyn awoke on a bed of pine needles, the ground cool and soft beneath her. She blinked against the shafts of sunlight spilling through the canopy, each ray carrying dust motes that danced like tiny spirits. For a moment she forgot where she was, until the sound of water trickling nearby reminded her she was deep in the wild, far from town, far from the safety of her past life, and now tethered to a man she barely understood. The Apache warrior stood at the stream, his silhouette etched against the light. Shirtless, his powerful back caught the sun as he bent to sharpen a stone blade on a flat rock. His long black hair flowed down his shoulders, and beads from his tribal necklace shifted with the faint breeze. Evelyn watched him quietly, torn between awe and unease. She had never seen anyone move with such quiet purpose, every gesture deliberate, efficient, as though he belonged to the earth itself. Evelyn sat up, brushing needles from her dress. I don't even know your name," she said softly, her voice unsteady. He lifted his head and turned, his dark eyes locking with hers. For a long moment he simply studied her, as though weighing whether to share a secret or keep it hidden. Finally, his voice came low, firm and steady. "Dakota," he said. The name lingered in the air, strange and powerful. Evelyn repeated it under her breath, trying it out on her tongue. "Dakota?" She looked down quickly, feeling the heat rise in her cheeks. She hadn't expected him to answer. Dakota rose, blade in hand, and crossed to where she sat. He crouched. Low, his presence close enough that she could smell the faint trace of smoke and pine resin clinging to him. He held out the blade, not threatening but offering. "For you," he said. Evelyn hesitated, staring at the sharp stone edge. I don't know how to use this." "You learn," Dakota replied simply, pushing it gently toward her hand. "Here, danger always near." His gaze flickered to the forest, where the shadows seemed alive with unseen threats. Her fingers curled slowly around the handle. The weapon felt strange in her grasp, primitive but real, more honest than any polished revolver she had seen in the hands of men back in town. She nodded, though fear stirred inside her. They walked together later that morning, following the stream. Evelyn stumbled often, her boots sinking into the damp earth, her dress snagging on brambles. Dakota moved ahead of her like a shadow, parting branches, clearing the path without words. She began to notice things she had ignored before: the rustle of small animals, the bird calls layered in rhythms, the way the light changed as clouds passed overhead. It was as if his presence sharpened her senses. At midday they paused in clearing where wildflowers carpeted the ground in brilliant colors. Evelyn sank down, exhausted, while Dakota scanned the perimeter, always alert. He finally sat near her, though not too close, his posture dignified even in rest. Why are you helping me?" she asked suddenly, the question bursting out. Before she could stop it, Dakota turned his head slowly toward her. His expression remained unreadable, but his voice carried weight. "I saw pain in your eyes," he said, "and strength. You walk alone, yet you still walk. That is why." Evelyn's chest tightened. No one had ever spoken to her that way, not her father, not the men in town, not even those she thought she loved. To them she had been fragile, something to own or dismiss. But Dakota saw her differently, as if her suffering was not weakness, but proof she endured. For a long while they sat in silence, broken only by the wind moving through the meadow. Evelyn plucked a wildflower and turned it in her hand, thinking of his words. The shame she had carried, the words she had cried in the dark, "I am no more virgin," still haunted her. Yet here, with this man who said so little, she felt for thee. First time that maybe her worth was not bound to what had been taken from her. A sudden noise shattered the calm. Branches cracked in the distance, heavy footsteps breaking the forest rhythm. Dakota stiffened instantly, his hand resting on the knife at his belt. He rose without a word, his posture a shield. Evelyn's heart hammered as she clutched the stone blade he had given her. The sound drew closer, the breath of something or someone moving fast through the trees. Evelyn's pulse raced, fear flooding her veins. Dakota glanced back once at her, his eyes sharp, then stepped forward into the shadows. Evelyn gripped the knife, her knuckles white, and whispered to herself, "I will not run." The jungle seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what would emerge. The forest thinned as they pressed onward, leaving behind the wildflower meadow and the whispering stream. Sunlight filtered through high branches, dappling the ground with gold and shadow. Evelyn's legs were stiff, her dress snagged on every branch, but the orchard and the meadow had given her a fragile strength she hadn't felt in days. She walked with a sense of purpose, however hesitant, following Dakota's sure steps through the undergrowth. After hours, the jungle gave way to stone ruins. A crumbling structure rose before them, half swallowed by ivy and time. Its walls were scarred and weathered, the roof mostly gone, but a bell tower still leaned bravely toward the sky. Evelyn stepped closer, her eyes wide. The ruins looked like a forgotten chapel, abandoned long before she was born. Dust and leaves swirled in the shafts of sunlight piercing the broken windows. Dakota slowed, his sharp gaze sweeping the area before he lowered himself to the ground beside her. He did not speak, but there was an authority in his presence, a silent assurance that they were safe for now. Evelyn inhaled the musty, earthy scent of the chapel and let her hands brush along the cracked stone walls. The air was cool, carrying a quiet stillness that made her heartbeat feel loud in comparison. She sank onto a broken pew, her palms pressed against the weathered wood. For the first time since the jungle, she felt the weight of her fear ease slightly. Dust motes floated in the sunlight like drifting stars, and she could hear the faint rustle of animals nesting in the corners of the ruins. "I haven't prayed in years," she whispered, almost to herself. "I don't even know if I can anymore." Dakota sat a few feet away, his posture steady, his eyes scanning the ruins. He did not respond immediately, as if listening to a conversation only he could hear. Then, finally, he spoke in his measured, accented English. "Pray is not words alone," his voice of heart. Evelyn tilted her head, unsure if he meant to comfort or instruct her. But I don't know what's left in my heart to voice, she admitted, her voice trembling. I feel empty. He leaned slightly forward, his elbows resting on his knees, the sunlight glinting on his bronze skin. Empty can be filled. Spirit can grow again, like tree in ruin. Her eyes welled up with tears, but this time they were not solely for the pain she had endured. They were for the possibility Takota's words suggested that she could reclaim something lost, that the world had not finished with her. Evelyn traced a finger along the altar, imagining it in its glory days, filled with candles and voices, filled with hope. She whispered her own small prayer, not for salvation, not for forgiveness, but for courage. I am still here, she said, her voice low but steady. Takota did not interrupt. He remained a silent sentinel, a presence that made her feel protected without touching her. The weight of him was reassuring, grounding, as if his calm had the power to tether her to the present, away from the ghosts of her past. Hours passed in quiet observation. The sun moved across the sky, casting new patterns of light through the chem. Shattered windows. Birds called from the ivy above, insects hummed in hidden corners, and Evelyn began to notice small signs of life reclaiming the chapel, tiny sprouts of green pushing through cracks, vines curling toward the light. She finally rose from the pew, brushing dust from her dress. Takota stood, stretching his long, lean muscles. We continue, he said simply, though there was no urgency, only steady motion. Before leaving, Evelyn paused at the altar. She laid a hand on the stone, feeling its rough, cool surface. It felt like a promise, not just that she could endure, but that she could move forward, that the past did not have to define her entirely. Takota watched her, his dark eyes unwavering. He made no comment, no gesture of praise. Yet Evelyn felt the approval, the quiet recognition, as tangible as the sunlight falling through the broken windows. As they stepped back into the jungle, the chapel's ruins receded behind them, half hidden by vines and shadow. Evelyn walked with a sense of renewed determination. She was still wary, still fragile, but the ruins had given her something she had almost forgotten: proof that life could persist, even in places abandoned and broken. Takota led her on, his footsteps sure and deliberate. Evelyn fell into rhythm. Beside him, a silent understanding passing between them. The forest stretched ahead, full of unknown dangers and trials, but for the first time in days she did not feel entirely alone. She was not yet whole, but she was beginning to reclaim herself. The jungle gave way to a deep canyon, carved over centuries by wind and rain. A narrow rope bridge stretched across it, swaying lightly in the breeze. The boards were weathered and uneven, and the ropes creaked under the weight of the wind. Evelyn paused at the edge, staring down into the yawning ravine. Below, the river shimmered like molten silver, rushing past jagged rocks far beneath. Her stomach twisted at the dizzying height. Takota stepped onto the bridge first, his bare feet sure and precise, the long ropes bending under his weight but holding firm. He glanced back at her, his dark eyes steady and calm. Evelyn's heart pounded in her chest. Every instinct screamed to run, to turn back to solid ground, but she knew there was no other path. Step lightly, he said, his voice low but commanding. Trust the ropes. Trust yourself. She nodded, though her hand shook as she clutched the nearest rope. The bridge swayed dangerously, boards creaking and twisting beneath her feet. Evelyn's boots caught on a loose plank and she froze, the drop below making her legs quiver. Panic clawed at her throat, a tight, suffocating grip. Takota stopped beside her, his hand outstretched. Look forward, he said firmly. Not down, forward. Evelyn forced her gaze ahead. The bridge seemed endless, each plank a trial. Her breathing came in short, rapid bursts, her knuckles white on the rope. She imagined the rope snapping, imagined herself plunging into the river below. Her mind raced with every possible danger, but Takota's calm presence anchored her. Step by step, she moved, one foot in front of the other. The wind tugged at her hair and dress, whipping her face with every sway. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Takota stayed just a few steps ahead, his strong frame unwavering, his dark eyes always on her, ready to catch her if she faltered. "Almost there," he said, his voice steady. "Breathe. One step at a time." Evelyn's chest heaved, her stomach nodding with fear and adrenaline. She could feel the weight of her journey, the exhaustion of fleeing, the hunger, the fear, and now this test of courage. But with Takota beside her, she began to understand something she hadn't realized before. Strength wasn't the absence of fear. It was moving forward despite it. The middle of the bridge creaked violently beneath her, a plank tilting sharply. She froze, gripping the rope with both hands. Takota was immediately beside her, one hand steadying her back, the other on the plank. "Trust yourself," he whispered. "You are stronger than you know." Evelyn's vision blurred with a mix of tears and wind. She nodded, took a deep breath, and stepped forward. One careful, deliberate step, then another. Slowly, the middle of the bridge passed beneath her, and she felt a rush of relief so intense it brought tears to her eyes. When the bridge finally ended, and her boots touched solid ground again, Evelyn dropped to her knees, shaking but victorious. She laughed, a sound of pure relief, half crazed with emotion. Takota watched silently, a faint shadow of a smile touching his lips. "You walked," he said simply. "You faced the fear. That is your strength." Evelyn looked up at him, her hair tangled, her dress torn and mud-streaked, yet her eyes shone with something fierce and unbroken. For the first time in days, she felt a spark of pride. She had survived the jungle, the waterfall, the orchard, the ruins, and now this bridge. With each trial, she felt herself rebuilding piece by piece. Takota extended his hand to help her to her feet. She took it, feeling the warmth and reassurance in his grip. There was no need for words. She knew he understood. The bridge had not only tested her body, but her courage, her will, and her trust as they continued along the canyon path. Evelyn glanced back at the bridge, now swaying empty behind them. The river roared far below, but she no longer felt fear. She had crossed. She had survived. And for the first time in weeks, she believed she could endure anything as long as she had the strength to move forward, and someone like Takota beside her. The canyon stretched ahead, jagged and imposing, yet she walked with her head high, ready for whatever came next. The canyon path finally opened into a wide, sun-drenched clearing. Evelyn blinked against the sudden brilliance, the golden light warm on her skin after days of shadowed forest and tangled undergrowth. Wildflowers carpeted the ground, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of pine, earth, and distant water. For a moment, she simply stood, taking it all in, feeling the air fill her lungs as if she were tasting freedom itself. Takota moved beside her, bare feet silent against the grass, muscles rippling under bronze skin, his long black hair catching the sunlight. Tribal beads and feathers glimmered along his chest as he scanned the clearing, alert but calm. Evelyn noticed the ease of his movements, the way he seemed part of the land, rooted yet flowing with it. He was a warrior, yes, but here he was also a guide, a protector, a steady presence beside her. Evelyn sank to the ground, brushing her hands over the soft grass. She let her eyes wander over the meadow, feeling a rare sense of peace. I think I can breathe here," she said softly, almost to herself. Takota knelt beside her, not pressing her for words, but simply sitting with her. After days of running, hiding, and fearing every shadow, this moment was almost surreal. Birds flitted above, singing their morning songs, and the gentle hum of life surrounded them. Evelyn felt her chest lighten, the heaviness that had clung to her like a second skin finally loosening. "Evelyn," Dakota said, his voice breaking the serene quiet, "you have walked through fire, river, forest, and canyon. You survive because you face fear. You survive because you choose life." She looked at him, eyes glistening with tears she hadn't meant to shed. I don't know how to repay you," she whispered. "I don't even know what I would give." He shook his head slowly, dark eyes softening. "No gift. You walk forward. That is enough. Life is reward enough for courage." She exhaled, a long, shuddering breath. The shame she had carried since the jungle, the words she had cried into the night, "I am no more virgin," had not disappeared, but they no longer defined her. With Dakota beside her, she could face herself without crumbling. She could face the world without fear. Evelyn stood slowly, feeling the sun warm her back. Dakota mirrored her movement, standing tall and unshaken. She reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. For the first time since she fled that jungle, she felt the possibility of trust, of connection, of a life that did not revolve around fear. Dakota's gaze softened, and he gestured toward a small stream that cut through the clearing. "Water. Rest. Then move," he said, pointing to the path that led further into the valley. "New life waits." Evelyn smiled faintly, a small, fragile thing, but genuine. She stepped forward, taking a sip from the cool stream, letting the water run over her fingers, down her arms. The simple act was transformative. She felt the warmth of the sun on her shoulders, the wind tangling her hair, the pulse of life in the clearing. Dakota watched her, silent, the weight of his presence grounding her. Then he extended a hand, not in command, but in offer. Evelyn took it, and the contact was steady, reassuring. Strength and trust flowed between them, unspoken yet absolute. For the first time since the jungle, Evelyn felt hope take root. She understood in the quiet clarity of the moment that survival was not just endurance, it was reclamation. Every trial had shaped her, but it had not broken her. She had walked through fear, faced despair, and emerged into light. As they began walking through the clearing together, Evelyn glanced back once at the canyon, the rope bridge faint in the distance. She smiled softly, no longer haunted by what had been behind her. The forest, the waterfall, the orchard, the chapel, and the bridge had all tested her, but here, in this open meadow of sunlight and life, she understood something vital. She was whole enough to begin anew. Dakota's hand remained in hers as they moved forward. Together, they stepped into the bright, sprawling world beyond the clearing, leaving shadows behind. The journey had been long, the trials immense, but in this sunlit meadow, Evelyn Harper finally believed in tomorrow.